Dear Diary.
Dear Diary.
Dear Diary, wow, today was a really hard day.
Dear Diary, I find sometimes my life can be hard.
Dear Diary, it will pass and it will be okay.
Dear Diary, I feel like today is going to be...
Shh, the Indigo Diaries. Dear Diary, welcome world to the Indigo Diaries. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Natasha Hickling and I'm the host of this podcast, the Indigo Diaries. Welcome back. And this is actually the first one of officially in 2021. Thank you to everyone for coming in and listening. If this is your first time, then welcome. If you're returning, then welcome back. This episode will be continuing of series 1. We now have series 2, which is called The World Through a Trainee's Coach's Eyes with me, Natasha Hickling. And you can come along with a journey of me going through a course in ADHD coaching. But I'm so excited to introduce our first guest, so I'm going to stop going on and officially, the first official one of 2021. This lady is someone that I have recently met, quite recently actually, in my group Indigo, but I was instantly drawn to her kind and spirited nature. So let me tell you a bit about her. Miriam Levy Gordon was born in 1963 to a highly traumatized parents. Because they were narcissists, they couldn't allow Miriam to develop at all. She grew up in a small apartment in Fort Lee, New Jersey, USA, as a shadow of herself, in pure survival mode, completely out of touch of her soul. Miriam received a diagnosis of inattentive ADHD when she was 49 years old. Getting the diagnosis was a relief in that it explained the retrospect a lot of the difficulties she had had in life. She currently lives with Stephen and their adorable white poodle, Miriam's first ever dog, Snowy, in a single family home, Miriam and Stephen's first house that they own in West Hempstead, New York, USA, on the South Shore of Long Island. Miriam is unable to work in any sort of neurotypical environment, so she continues her life work in therapy and to research and write about experiences she's learned about her life experiences in her journal, which she hopes to develop into a published writing at some point. Her ultimate goal is to be able to share her life experiences with others who are or have been experienced the great misfortune that she has, in the hope of helping them. If you would like to see her full bio, please look in the description below. So, Miriam, I welcome you to the Indigo Diaries.
Thank you, Tasha. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to do this with you, really.
And me and Miriam have actually been trying to get this together. We got together like a few times. One time the internet wasn't working, then I was ill. We've been trying to get this together, so I'm very excited that we're together. So it's just such a pleasure to have you here. And I have to tell everyone that it's just, I really like it when you really get with someone and you just know, I always ask people what they want to begin in their pre-interview. So when we do our pre-interview, and Miriam was actually the first person who knew exactly where she wanted to start. And I remember her saying, I want to go from chronological order. So Miriam, let's go from the beginning. You tell your story.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that I need to start with the story about my mother's life, because not the whole, just the parts that made a really huge impact on my upbringing. My mother had an extremely tragic life. Her real mother, for whom I'm named, Miriam, died when my mother, Grace, was 5 years old. She had one other younger sister from the same mother. What happened was, now my mother's grandfather, my great-grandfather, was a big rabbi. I think Miriam came over when, Miriam came over with her new husband, Chilabi, who also lived in Turkey. My family originally was living in Izmir, Turkey.
Oh,
it was a big center of Jewish life and activity at that time in the 1920s. So they came over to Atlantic City, as a young couple. Well, there were a lot of other young Sephardic Jewish couples from the Turkish area where they were living. So a lot of immigrants from there.
Okay.
And but what happened was after Miriam died tragically, I believe it was in childbirth, giving birth to their third child.
Oh, wow.
The family obviously came together to figure out what to do. So my great-grandfather, Miriam's father, had 5 daughters, and so the second oldest daughter, it was agreed after much discussion that she would marry my grandfather. His name was Chilebi. It's a very Turkish name.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, it's a Turkish name. So they actually, I believe that Rabbi Katan, that was my great-grandfather, went over to Paris with Esther, that was the second oldest daughter, his second oldest daughter, and Chilebi also met. They met in Paris and they got married there. I believe they were married by my grandfather. But unfortunately, I think that a lot of the problems came from the trauma of migration, and I do think that my mother and all her siblings and my grandfather and probably my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother, I think there's a genetic legacy of high sensitivity and empathy, which does it can, if people with these traits are raised in a supportive home, they can do very well. This is all according to Elaine Aron, who wrote The Highly Sensitive Person.
Great book.
Yes. Yeah, I've found it to be indispensable.
Me too.
And so unfortunately it was my mother, I mean, she was basically an enraged, terrified 5-year-old girl. I guess by the time Esther came into the picture and married her father, she was probably about 6 or 7. And I don't think, my one of the several therapists I've seen in my life told me when I told her this story that you don't heal from something like that. Of course you can. It has such a, being an orphan at such a young age,
Yeah,
is too traumatic to not affect the rest of one's life. Doesn't mean you can't do anything about it, but
100%. Yeah.
It's really one of the most traumatic things that can happen to a child. So anyway, Esther and my mother did not get along from the very beginning. So she was raised by the quote unquote evil stepmother. And when my mother finally, her younger sister, who was also from the same mother, Miriam, her name was Becky, and Becky in her early 30s developed breast cancer.
Oh.
So my mother was constantly, the stress of that compounded with living
everything else. Yeah.
And so I don't know why this seems to be the truth, but it seems that human beings can really only change when they've had a terrible, terrible shock or gone through some terrible, terrible trauma. That's when change really happens. It's not, not one after the other. You have one after the other, forget it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Sometimes, why is it, it makes me think of when a child is born, at least in Western medicine, they take the newborn baby by the feet, hang it upside down, and smack its bottom. I mean, hello world. You know,
I love that.
it's why do we have why are we such tough nuts to crack? You know, why does it have to be so awful usually? I mean, anyway, so when my mother went to New York. That's where she met my father at the 92nd Street Y. They had a big program for Jewish singles. And so they made up to get married. Now, Becky died in February of 1961.
Oh my goodness.
My mother got married in September 1961. She never really put the whole thing together for me. I had to piece it together after, my mother was the last of all the siblings to pass. She passed away 4 years ago. My father passed away almost 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So they got married in September of 61, and I have pictures from their wedding, and there were no guests other than the immediate family. And that my mother explained to me was that they were all in mourning. This is a special mourning period in Jewish law that for a parent anyway, I guess for a sibling, it's a year where you can't participate in any public celebrations.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, Esther, I don't know what kind of mental illness she had, but she was mean. She was incredibly mean. I mean, my mother, when she was a child, was probably very mean to Esther, but as a mature adult would have been able to understand
that. Yeah, they would understand that she's a child and doesn't know anything else.
Yeah, no, Esther didn't. Well, I wasn't there, but she reacted most uneducated people would, and she would argue that she's very educated. In that Turkish society, the Turkish Jewish society that she came from, having a secular education was considered a high status thing for Jewish women. But along with that, the extreme, the reputation of a woman, because, secular learning is, associated with being more worldly and going out into the world. And, for a society like that was so deeply religious and deeply sexually repressed, the women went out of their way to negate any possible smear on their reputation. And it came out as like Puritanism practically. So my mother, she got married, and Esther just kept getting meaner and meaner. She refused. She ruled the family with an iron fist. I think my grandfather was just, through his whole life with her, just kept his head down and shut up, because she couldn't stand not being in complete control. Shillaby and Esther had 2 children, my mother and Becky's stepbrother and stepsister. Isaac was the youngest, and Rita was Esther and Shillaby's oldest. And Rita and Isaac never married because they spent their life taking care of their mother. She was so demanding that she controlled everything about their lives. And my mother dared to get married. she wouldn't tolerate that, and she did not approve of my father. And Rita actually tried to fly the coop at one point. She went to Israel, where we have family, and my cousin Ellie there tried to fix her up, on dates. But Rita wouldn't go on any dates because she said my mother wouldn't approve. My mother wouldn't approve. She never got married. This, as far as I'm concerned, Esther stole life from her children, and my mother escaped by a miracle. And the worst part, the worst thing was when my mother gave birth to me. My grandfather had the temerity, and this is probably the one time or so in his life that he stood up to Esther. He came up to New York when I was born, to be there.
Good.
He refused. Esther refused, and she wouldn't let Isaac or Rita, who were both adults by that point, go with him. And when he came back to Philadelphia late, she forbade her husband and her two children from ever visiting my mother. Don't talk to them. You don't visit them. Meanwhile, I was a newborn baby.
Yeah.
My father, my mother was always complaining to my father about this. Not always, but he knew that she was very upset about it. And he said, one day he said, "That's it. We're going. I don't care what they say. We're going. This is ridiculous." So when my mother walked in with me in her arms, little baby me, Esther said, "Get ready for this. This is really bad." She said it in Ladino, so my father would not understand. Ladino is a Spanish dialect that was spoken by Jews in Turkey.
Okay.
She said, "Look, they brought their little piece of filth with them."
Oh my goodness. Oh.
That's what she said.
Her mouth is literally open right now. That is absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah. It's ironic that my mother's name is Grace. It really is. It really is. There's poetry in that. It really is. But can you imagine?
No, I can't. Just the thought of someone, even like in your life, that would have said that is just unthinkable.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, if you look at pictures, my father liked to do photography, and because of him, I have really good pictures. But they're really good because they really show the real emotion behind it. My mother almost always looked terrified, stressed, anxious, bored. She was so alone. Most people, when they have children, they have family around them, they have friends around them, they have a community around them. But not my parents. And my father was also from a very, very troubled family. Just, Eastern Europe. I think he was second generation American or third generation. But the immigration is extremely hard on people who, it's hard on everybody, but particularly difficult for people who are empathic, highly sensitive, and, perhaps, with, so intergenerational trauma it's really come together as the focus of my work. And so I had to start from there. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, how do you think that, I was going to say it's really refreshing, but that's probably the wrong term to use. It's just really honest. And I thank you for sharing that with us, because I think trauma is a huge thing that people really don't discuss when it comes to people with ADHD, or just people in general. People seem to really, so I really applaud your courageousness for coming on, for saying this. How do you think that all that impacted your childhood?
My mother, so this is the part where, look, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what makes
Of course.
goes into making a person a narcissist, because there may be genetic components, but that I would imagine that environment has a lot more to do with it than genetic tendency. I mean, there are things like mental illnesses like schizophrenia, which have a definite genetic
obviously,
protocol. But I don't think, I think that my father, I'm sure, had ADHD. My mother, I'm not so sure. But I was born in 1963. Nobody talked about this. Meanwhile, if you look at the research, it was around.
Yes,
it was around, but just nobody
talked about it.
Yes. Yeah. Minimal brain dysfunction.
I hate that. That's I learned about that recently, and it was just the worst thing. That's just horrendous.
I know. I heard your podcast on that.
It's just horrendous.
Yes. Well, the reason that I'm being so honest about this, first of all, I don't have children to embarrass. Second of all, recovering from this is my life's work. I mean, I have a PhD in developmental biology.
Wow.
But that's not my life's work. It couldn't be. I would have liked it to be, but it couldn't be, because I had to become a whole person out of a shell. What happened was my mother was so bereft and so desperate to have a loving family of her own. She didn't know the difference between keeping me. I was just, as a narcissistic parent does, they make the child an extension of themselves and their needs. And that's what she did with me. I think I worked out recently, and this is, I've done for the past couple of years, a lot of inner child work with my therapist. And it keeps coming back. That was really powerful, because it keeps coming back to, from the time I was born, my mother had a very strong resistance to my expressing any sort of not independence, but like a baby has, needs, and it's taking in the world around it. What I was taking in, and the mother and child bond is
crucial.
something.
It's a huge part of development for a child.
Yes. I'm sure with my high sensitivity and my empathic tendencies that I picked up every little tiny feeling, because I've always been someone who just absorbs.
Absorbs everything.
Yes. Moods, troubles, energy. And I think that, this was probably close to 10 years ago, I read this book by Amy Tan called The Kitchen God. Amy Tan is a best-selling author of several books, but there was in it, there was a, excuse me for a sec, I need some water.
It's okay. You're all good.
Thank you. So in this book, there was this, it was set in China, and in World War II, there was this young man who became a terrible alcoholic, but he was also a pilot in the Chinese army, I guess. But on the times when he came home, he would become so violent when he came home, beat up his wife, but his child, baby, they just, in the book, it describes where this violent, angry, crazy, out of control man comes home, and the baby wanted to cry, and the instant she heard him, she sort of 6 months old, curled up into a little ball. Amy Tan describes this in detail. And it curled up into a little ball and made these tiny little whimpers. And I've thought about that many times over the years and why it would impact me so strongly. And I realized my mother I must have felt from my mother very strongly she didn't want me to cry. If babies cry for normal reasons.
Yeah, of course
I think
they
it
do.
troubled her so much for me to cry that she couldn't tolerate it. And I think I stopped. And, it's interesting when I was, I don't know, probably in my late 30s or so, my therapist then asked me, or she mentioned to me, Miriam, my other clients cry a lot. You don't cry at all. Why do you think that is? At the time, I don't know. I've been thinking about that too. There's so much that this inner child work exposed, and this hit me like a wrecking ball. I cried recently. This is recent. I cried for several days. And it's really true. I don't cry because what I developed was, I think, a lot of emotional dead zones. And if I can show you pictures of my parents taking me on outings when I was a baby. And I have this look on my face, like very troubled. It's not a happy child.
No, that's not. But it's just so strange that like you still today, you're still learning things about your past. And so how did you, as you grew up and you got into your teens, how did you manage all of this pressure and all this stuff of your trauma? How did you kind of start on this discovery?
Well, I think that, it didn't happen for a long time. I can't understand. There's something in me that I can't explain that kept driving me to figure things out. I was born like that. I mean, I asked my parents a lot of questions. The psychiatrist who diagnosed me with ADHD when I was 49 years old, he said that probably happened was that I used my intelligence to get around the obstacles that were put in my way. And I was, my father, he was also, both my parents were very bright. And my father was an electrical engineer, and he was very scientific, and I was very scientific. I was really interested in biology from a very early age.
Clearly.
What, you too?
No, I said clearly because what you went on to do. So
yeah. I mean, I love science. I always loved science. But let's see. So basically what happens, and I've read about this a lot too, I've written about it a lot, it's all in my journal right now, but this is what I want to ultimately, write stuff like about this kind of stuff. What happens when someone, especially a child, undergoes that trauma, they automatically sort of figure out, and this is on a more primitive brain level. It just becomes a matter of survival. And
survival mode. Yeah.
So nothing about this was conscious. I developed all of these defense mechanisms subconsciously.
Yeah.
I knew I could not do anything to express myself, to because I was terrified. And my father had a part in this too, and my mother sometimes must have been terrified of my father, because he went into these horrible rages and he would slam things, and curse. And, I don't think he ever hit my mother. I don't remember seeing anything like that. And I don't believe he hit me as a child. When I was older, I think he smacked me with a belt a couple of times. And he once, we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom for the 4 of us.
Oh my goodness.
And when a little kid, when they're just babies, and it's manageable, but not when they're 4.
No.
I mean, 2 adults and 2 adolescents, it's basically 4 adults.
Yeah.
And I was taking too long sitting on the toilet one day for his liking. He came right in and slapped me across the face. He really couldn't contain his rage.
Yeah.
He wanted certain things, and he just wanted that my mother would go along with it, and she didn't. And I can tell you there were many times where he came home furious, and she just threw me under the bus. And as a result, the horrific things he would say about me and my sister, like just an example that I still remember, when I was probably about 6 or so, he said, "You'll be mush before you're 20," because we didn't go out and play, or, that wasn't nearly the worst thing. But it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all bad, but those first few years, which are incredibly critical for healthy childhood development, were completely obliterated. We're oppressed. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And we're going to take a break because I think we're both very thirsty. Lots of talking, lots of listening. And I have to applaud you yet again, this complete honesty. And I hope that you come back after the break, and we're going to explore more into Miriam's life and just, hear more of her story. And we're out. If you would like any information on Indigo's support group, check out the website below for our link to our Facebook page, or email at indigo.adhd2020@gmail.com. If you would like to offer any comments or feedback, or if you are interested in the world hearing your story, then please reach out, either through the group or through our email. As said before, have a good week. Check in again later, Indigos. Shh, the Indigo Diaries. And welcome back. Myself and Miriam do what I do with most guests, is end up talking off the screen and go, we're not recording. And we come up with some good stuff, and we drank lots of water, so we're feeling a bit better now. So welcome back, everyone. If you didn't join us before the break, we're speaking to Miriam, and the first half was a lot about past trauma and parents and family dynamics, okay? And this half, we just got to the point where we were talking about the survival mode of being a child and how that's affected her through her life. So we'll start with kind of how you were diagnosed with ADHD and how that kind of came about.
Okay, sure. So actually, I've been going to psychotherapy consistently for the past 40 years.
Wow.
I mean, every week. There were chunks of about 6 months at the most where I was without one. But other than that, for the most part, at least twice a week. In the beginning, when I was 25, and I started with this Freudian psychoanalyst that I wound up seeing for 20 years, not willingly, but it was 3 times a week at first, because I was literally beside myself. I could barely function. I needed that in order to function.
Yeah.
But so I finally got out of this woman's clutches when I was 45 years old. and the psychoanalyst. I mean, that's another story I can tell another time. But so I had to look for a new therapist. And so by that time, I had already, when I was 43, I got fired from my medical writing job. I was there for 4 years. There were certain things I did very well, but there were certain ADHD things that I just couldn't overcome.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't know.
Yeah.
But so by then, that motivated me to say, well, if I can't do this work, if I can't do this type of work, then what the hell am I going to do? So I went online. This is, internet research is my thing.
Love it.
I went online and I found this career test called the Kiersey Temperament Sorter, which is based on the Myers-Briggs personality types. There are 16 types.
Yeah.
And so it's like a combined personality and career test, which all of them should be. All career tests should be like that.
Yes, they definitely should be.
Yeah. But so I found out, I learned a lot from that. And when I read the results, I'm like, this is me. How do they know me?
It knew me.
But it mentioned, the first thing I learned was that I was INFP, which in Myers-Briggs stands for introverted, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving. I've learned more about it in the past that, I haven't reviewed it in a while, so I'm not by any means an expert on it. But so I said, what's an introvert? So I started finding on the internet, what's an introvert? And then I found the first book that really started all my research on, who I am and everything.
Yeah.
And I found out from either my work or from the test results itself, the first book I ever had called The Introvert Advantage by Marty Olson Laney. It was a great book. And I was like, wow, this is documented. There are people like me. It's not just me that's retarded. I mean, I really, I was always fighting a sense that I was really stupid. But at the same time, there was always evidence, even when I was in grade school, my teachers didn't understand. This is very typical experience for ADHD people. They would say to my parents, she's clearly not stupid. So we don't know why she has trouble with this, and from that book, from the Introvert Advantage book, I learned about Elaine Aron's Highly Sensitive Person. That was the next book I read. And so I just kept going on from there.
I love that, on and on and on.
Yes. So one of the things I learned from Elaine Aron's book is that Jungian psychology is far more accepting of or receptive to introverts than Freudian psychology. And actually, Jung and Freud, they started working together, but eventually they split because their views were very, very different.
Very different.
And Jung had a much more positive view of introverts. Freud had a very negative view of introverts. And so it was a good idea. It was really good that I got out of the clutches of that horrible Freudian psychologist I went to for 20 years.
You see. Knowledge.
Yes. Because I started bringing stuff I was learning to her. It mattered not a whit. All she wanted to talk about was, what job are you going to do now? What are you going to do? Your husband's upset at you because you're not earning money. What are you going to do? What are you can do this or nothing. She wasn't listening to you. She wasn't hearing me.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
I can imagine.
So I looked online for Jungian psychotherapists, and there's something called the Jung Institute. The Jung Institute, and they have a referral service to Jungian psychologists. And so I found one through there, and I went to her for a few years, and I was very thrilled that she understood HSPs, highly sensitive persons. But eventually it started, our conversations started, I mean, I guess I was that? It's hard to remember whether I was working as a medical writer or whether I was still in graduate school. But, I've had people say to me throughout my adult years, when they would get angry at something that I did, they'll say, "You're incompetent." And I kept saying that to her in different ways. And without understanding, how to go on from there.
Yeah.
And fit into the, a neurotypical society. Eventually, after about 3 years of seeing her and about 3 years of what I felt was mostly unproductive, I mean, it was always good to get stuff off my chest.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But she said, I wonder if you might have ADHD. This was after 3 years. I'm like, it took her that long for it to dawn on her. So she suggested that I take this test online, that, if you score within a certain range, then it's very likely that you have ADHD. And I scored very likely to have ADHD. And so at that time we were moving from Westchester County to Long Island, which is basically, over some bridges. And so, because Long Island is separated from the mainland.
Yeah.
So, excuse me.
Okay.
So when I got to Long Island, that was when I found the psychiatrist who ultimately diagnosed me with ADHD. And so it was a big turning point in my life.
How do you think that it impacted kind of your life? When you were diagnosed, how did it make you feel, and was you really impacted by it?
I think I was very angry that I was like, wow, I had a whole lifetime where I was suffering from something that was understood or known, and yet I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was angry. I was really angry. But at the same time, it did give me a sense of peace and comfort, because I had an explanation for all the things that seemed to have gone very wrong in my professional life and in my personal life. Sorry.
Okay.
So it was anger and it was relief as well. And, I think for a while I saw this psychiatrist as my therapist also, but he really wasn't a therapist.
Yeah.
I eventually had to find somebody else. And I actually asked a friend in my new neighborhood in West Hempstead if she knew of anybody. And that's how I met my current therapist. And she's fantastic. She's a Ph.D, which is just a type of psychology doctorate. And, so she's had traditional training, but she's very bright, and she and I are very much on the same wavelength in terms of, like, she understands all the HSP and, INFP and
She understands your terminology. I like it.
Well, she understands what it means. And it was really with her, was the first time that I did inner child work. Yeah. So it's been that long. It took me that long to get to that point. And probably, you know, because I was trying to function in the neurotypical world, I just did the best I could, and basically, again, it was a survival mode. I just did what I had to do because I was always in a lot of psychic pain because there's always this very deep part of me that was festering under a load of crap. I mean, my soul was screaming basically, but I didn't know, you know. And since then, I've also I've read a number of books that have really impacted me, and so it's just, I think I needed to have a certain level of maturity in order of inner strength in order to do this, because I was so decimated inside that it really took a long time and a lot of veering off in the wrong direction, like with this analyst and even this psychiatrist. He eventually acted in a way that I said, bye.
Yeah, goodbye. I know what I want, and it's not you.
Yeah. So, and a lot of painful stuff. My relationship was very difficult because essentially my husband came from a background that was just as destructive and sad. And it was just very hard. But I've grown so much, since. So I've been working with my current therapist for, let's see, since 2013. So that is almost 7 years. Yeah, 7 years. Gosh.
Wow. It's weird. It's weird, right? Because we're not very good at dates, and then you get it, and you're like, "Whoa, that's a long time." Yeah. I just wanted to say that when you said, I was about to say when you were talking about all these years of living, and you just had to kind of get on with it, and exactly what you said, survival mode, is exactly what I was thinking. I was about to say, and then you went survival mode, and it was just one of those moments where it was just like, ding, our brains are thinking the same. And I just wanted to say that and highlight that the fact that you didn't just let it get on top of you. You just went, and the resilience that I can see from your story, and you just keep going and you keep going, and then you have one therapist and it's not right, so you change, and then it's not right and you change. It's just such an amazing thing to see, and I really think that people will be able to resonate with that just because we're told to carry on, carry on with what you've got, and you didn't do that. You didn't settle. You just kept going because you want to give yourself the best life. And I just think I just really wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. Well, like I said, I really am driven by something inside, a force inside. It's just me. I can't not do that. It's just my nature, I mean, what do I do if I give up? I can't give up. The state of once you my mother once said to me, this was when I was an adult, she said to me, don't go to a mental institution. They don't, it's not good. And why would my mother say something like that to me? She felt the same way about herself. There's really nowhere else to go. Mental institutions are basically awful places. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's some that do a lot of good. I'm sure that there are some that are really improving and really doing a lot of good work. But traditionally, it was just a warehouse for, mentally incapacitated people.
And just not a nice place to be, and people just didn't want to go there.
Mm. So I knew there was nobody. We're living in a society where there's a bias towards, this sort of like, you're on your own, basically.
Yeah,
Do or die.
exactly. Do or die.
Do or die. Get on with it.
Yeah, get on with it. Oh, that's the famous line. Just get on with it. Oh, I wish I could.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, the problem is that most people can do that without
Yeah, automatically.
that we can't. People like us can't, and that is so hard for people who don't have this property to understand. That's why I've always thought that if you can't get I lost my train of thought. I'll remember it. I'll remember it.
Don't worry, that happens to me every day. So that's you don't need to worry about that.
Thing?
Yeah, that's definitely an ADHD thing. Definitely, that happens to me every single day.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, obviously there's a lot more to these stories, but I think I've gotten pretty much to the point where I've, explained my journey, and where I was and where I am now. So, you have any specific questions?
Yeah, I have one more question, and that is, so how do you kind of, after all these years and kind of living with the knowledge now that you've had ADHD for a long time, how do you kind of manage that now?
Well, first of all, I have not been able. I've tried to do freelance work, but it never really occurred to me how vulnerable freelance or gig workers are, because you don't have any protection.
No.
If somebody says something that, or you do something they don't like, goodbye. As if, you're an afterthought and you're gone. And, I've tried also, I know that, I mean, especially after the illnesses that I've had, I suppose that I should just go through them for the record.
Share whatever you would like.
Well, in August of 2013, first of all, we had just bought and moved into our home. The very first home that we ever owned.
Oh.
And it was incredibly stressful for me because my mother did not want us to, she wanted us to stay living in a small, apartment, and rent. And because she was always like that. She lived through the Depression, and she never got over that either. She was a child during the Depression. So she was always terrified of being left without any money. And of course being thrown out on your butt. But so I had to overcome that terror as well. I mean, my mother and I were always extremely close, even though we weren't living in the same place. I still didn't have, even after all that, decades of therapy, I still was so connected to her. But basically the trauma of that, and then my uncle, my father's brother, a lifelong bachelor also, he was dying basically, and it was, my mother didn't want anything to do with having to take care of him because as far as she was concerned, she would expect him to do what he did, what she did, which is to make sure that everything, every single tiny thing about her end of life situation would be completely taken care of. So my sister and I wouldn't have to worry about anything. And that's, and she didn't, she thought, that he should have handled that on his own before things got out of control, but he couldn't, he didn't. And so I was, it's funerals are very, very expensive.
Oh, yep, they are, for sure.
My mother was determined not to, pay for his funeral because she was so angry about, his irresponsibility and her, in contrast to her responsibility, that she didn't care if he was cremated. And according to Jewish law, that's forbidden. And I knew that my uncle spent the last decades of his life as an observant Jew. And I knew that I couldn't let that happen. And it was really tough. My sister and I drove down to Philadelphia, where he was living, several times. And I had to find the lawyer that he had made a will with, some 30 years ago or something. And thank God I finally found the brother who was a rabbi, and he helped us out a lot. But the whole thing was extremely stressful because we had to make all the plans. And the rabbi was extremely helpful. But the next month in August, I started having these symptoms. First of all, there were sort of like random pains in my joints. Like one day it would be in my right fingers, and next day in my left fingers, But I also started getting short of breath. And I said to my husband at one point, because I was walking and I would get out of breath very quickly. I was like, honey, there's something very wrong. I think we need to go to the hospital. It turned out that I had something called pericarditis, which is the pericardium is a protective membrane that surrounds the heart muscle. And in pericarditis, and this happens to people with autoimmune diseases like lupus especially.
Okay.
It's very rare. But what happens is fluid, it's an inflammatory condition. Fluid starts to build up between the pericardium and the heart muscle. And if it's not treated, a lot of times, apparently, it gets resolved on its own. Mine didn't. I was in the hospital for a whole week, and they were trying to treat me medically first, but it wasn't working. So they had to do this thing called interventional radiology, where they actually had to use a laparoscopic probe to go in. So it went under my rib cage by the solar plexus, and then had to loop the thing all the way around my left shoulder. So
oh my goodness.
my lung. And all they gave me was morphine. And supposedly that I was awake for that. I was like, well, I can feel that. But eventually they drained 600 milliliters of fluid.
Wow.
And it was already, what happens if you don't treat it, it strangles your heart and you die.
Okay. Wow.
So I got this close to dying, basically. And then the following summer, in June 2014, I noticed that I was menstruating very heavily and it wouldn't stop. So I went to see my gynecologist, and they did a biopsy, and they told me I had endometrial cancer. Fortunately, it was caught very, very early stage, but I did have a hysterectomy.
Oh
Then,
my goodness.
yeah, and then 2 months later, actually, I had the psychiatrist that I got the diagnosis of ADHD from, he was behaving so inappropriately and he was stressing me out so badly. I think this triggered, I think it was brewing in the first place, but it triggered an autoimmune disease. My joints were hurting, but then my left knee and ankle really swelled up. So I, general practitioner doctor told me I need to see a rheumatologist. So I knew of one, so I went to her and I got a diagnosis of something called granulomatosis with polyangiitis, which is a very rare form of it's a general, belongs to a general category called vasculitis, where your own immune system attacks the epithelium in your blood vessels. So, I've had several treatments for it. But and there have been, serious bumps along the road.
Yeah.
I recently changed rheumatologist because this woman that I was going to was just, I was appalled at her behavior. So, and she didn't like me at all. So, whatever.
Yeah, again, you're showing your resilience and going somewhere else that's different to where you were going before. It's just so like crazy how the mind and the body are so aligned. And you said like one of them, brought on the other, and it's just, that's another huge impact that we're only just starting to really touch on. And it's just so mindfulness and it's just so crucial.
It is. It really is. Actually, my sister used to go see this. She was all into the alternative medicine. She actually trained to work as a reflexologist, but she found this practitioner. She was a chiropractor, but she also did a lot of the healing arts on her own. So she used all of that in her work. And I went to her a few times, and the last time I went to her, she said, if you don't start loving yourself, you're gonna die. She said that, and I knew to take it seriously. Because first of all, I've been learning on my own about the body-mind connection, but also this woman is amazing. She, the kind of work she does doesn't get popular support, nor can you get insurance to cover it because it's too alternative. It's too, outside the mainstream. But anyway, but part of when I was going through all these illnesses, I said to myself, I have to do yoga again. I had never done it like really seriously, but I knew it was very healing. And in yoga, I learned Ayurveda is a 5,000-year-old healing art that originated in India. It's 5,000 years old. And they're just figuring out that all the stuff they knew 5,000 years ago is being medically and scientifically
brought back,
confirmed today. But the same thing with Chinese medicine that's thousands of years old. The West has done a terrible thing by ignoring this. To the point where I feel like they're being willfully ignorant and therefore incredibly irresponsible and not taking care of patients. It makes me very angry. But the thing is, it's an institution. It's going to change. If it's not one person that's going to change it. It has to be there are people out there. There are MDs out there traditionally
trying to change it.
I mean, Deepak Chopra is probably the most famous of all of these, and probably has done a lot to bring Ayurveda into medical treatment.
I
Yes.
100% agree. And wow. It's funny, like what goes around comes around. It all comes back round, you know, even everything we're learning about ADHD, it's been there before, and it's all, well, most of it. And we're just starting to really touch upon things, and it's just incredible how it spirals round and round.
Mhm.
And I just want to say, Miriam, is there anything that you kind of want to, anything that you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah. A lot of people may think that, you know, I'm being very brave, and I appreciate compliment. To me, this is absolutely necessary. And it may because I don't think conventionally, and that, you know, I know through experience that I cannot function the way people are expected to in the neurotypical world. Plus, I have all the trauma, which has really devastated my body and my mind in many, many ways. I feel like I have a mission to tell my story in the hopes that people will start to understand how important, you know, these these things that have been ignored in Western society are so critical uh, for healthy child development. You know, there's a lot going on now, much more than there ever was before. Um, one of many resources I would say was very influential was the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. If you go to their website, you see just how critical the first 7 years of a child's life is critical. The environment is critical to healthy brain development, and abuse or neglect can adversely affect it, so that these kids come out. That's where the cycle of poverty comes from. It just keeps getting transmitted from generation to generation. You know, because it goes hand in hand. That abuse, early childhood abuse, just, you know, basically healthy connections in the brain that are supposed to form in a healthy mother-child relationship, they don't form, and it leaves people with, and I think ADHD is a major outcome of that. I'm not saying it's, you know, I can't make generalizations, but, well, it is a generalization. In other words, you know, everyone's different, and, you know, no two stories are exactly the same. But this has been shown scientifically now. And it's those first years of, we can't continue in a society that basically chucks you out on your own, you know, live or die. I don't give a shit. You know, that's basically what we're living in.
Truth.
So it's so critical that people understand this, because if this kind of stuff is taken to heart and really put into practice in society, then the whole world will be better. And I need to do this. That's about it.
Wow, I'm just so amazed by that thought. Like, I just 100% agree. 100%. And the whole time she was speaking, I was like in awe, like if you could see my face, I was just staring, because that is just the absolute truth there. And I really hope that, and I'm really just honored that you chose this platform to come and speak your truth and speak that, because it is necessary. It is necessary to share our stories, and it's so important, especially that the fact that you've come on to discuss trauma, which is so sadly missed, I feel, and that you've been so honest to share that is, I think it's been a huge piece of the puzzle that's not really been on, that I've not really heard much about. And if anything comes from this, it's that people have heard your story. And if this reaches 1, 20, 100 people, it's
Yeah.
touched someone, because I know it has me. So
Mhm.
thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you so much. I'm also really, I'm so excited that we found each other,
Me
you
too.
and I, through the Indigo support group. And we should also talk about that suggestion I had where Indigo and ADHD, what are the connections? And what are the
Definitely will be. That's definitely a discussion.
agenda?
We'll have to get you back on to discuss that. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope that you come back next week, and listeners, and that you come back and we listen to series 2, and hopefully we can get some more of series 1 on this year, because we leave Indigos with a inspirational yet relatable story that I know so many people will be able to relate to this. So I thank you, Miriam, for giving us that gift.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you for the opportunity. It means a lot to me.
And it means a lot to us. Thank you. I just want to say, out of today's episode, please reach out if you would like to share your story with others, because just like it has today, it can really make the biggest difference, not only in your own life, but in others. So signing out, Indigos, see you soon, and have a good week. And just remember that we are great and we can make that difference. And we're out.
Dear diary.
Dear diary.
Dear diary.
Today is ending. I'll check in again tomorrow.
Tomorrow is a brand new beginning.
Good night, sweet dreams.
I think tomorrow will be
Shh.